In front of a camera, Tom explains his wife self-deleted on their wedding day. Then he shares the whole story, which happened a few months ago. Tom and his girlfriend Eve read an ad from a company called the Millennium Project seeking married couples for a research study. It'll last 30 days and the payment is $50,000. Eve points out Tom would have enough time to finish his book and the money would allow them to finally start a life together. They aren't actually married, so they agree to lie. Before meeting with the scientists for an interview, Tom reveals he's bought a ring and proposes to Eve so they can marry after the experiment is over. Eve accepts and notices the numbers 923 are engraved on the ring, so Tom says that's the day she stole his heart. Then the couple meets with the director, who explains he's studying the honeymoon phase and why that feeling eventually fades. He also mentions that statistically more marriages will fail because only special relationships can outlast biology. The director used to be married, but unfortunately his wife died when she was young. It was her death that inspired him to do the study. Tom and Eve lie and say they've been married for a month, then they're interviewed separately. The contrast among their answers is quite clear, but they also show love for each other. Sometime later all the couples chosen for the study are gathered at the facility. Tom is clearly nervous, and while he's still sure he wants to do this, he mentions they should have a safe word in case either of them want to abandon the experiment at any time. Eve agrees and they choose 923 as their safe word. Then the director announces the start of the experiment and the couples are split by making the men and women leave through different doors. Then Eve is given an injection that puts her to sleep. When she wakes up, she's on a bed with Tom and both are wearing the clothes assigned by the company. She wakes Tom up too and they explore the house together, getting surprised when they see a hologram in the living room. This is the mediator, who allows a scientist to check on them without skewing the results of the study. She asks them to put on a pair of headsets that record their brain waves whenever they discuss the experience. After testing it with a simple question, the mediator tells them she can be reached at any time through the device on the table and disappears. Now the couple is free to explore the house. They find an old record player and play some music to dance and sing in the living room. They check the kitchen and find a futuristic dispenser that brings them any food or drink they ask for. They also unpack the only bag they were allowed to bring, since they'll be spending Christmas in the house. They've bought gifts for the occasion. Eve has also brought cookies that were spiked with uppers in Tom's notebook so he can keep working on his novel. There are cameras everywhere, but sadly their phones have no signal in the house. There's also a very nice office for Tom to work in peace. In the evening, they ask the dispenser for a bunch of things just for fun. Then they light up the fireplace and bring some champagne to the couch to watch a movie on the screen that rises from the coffee table. Afterward they go to the bedroom and cover the camera with their clothes so they can get naughty. Eve reminds Tom to wear protection, and once they get going, Tom is rougher than usual. After they're done, Eve is quite shaken, so Tom apologizes and comforts her. On day 3, the couple is watching a movie in which the protagonist gives birth. Seeing the baby on the screen inspires Tom to say they should have one, but Eve immediately rejects the idea because she doesn't think they're parent material. On day 11, they decide to try the spiked cookies. She immediately bites one, but Tom is hesitant even though he's tried it before. To help him relax, Eve goes to prepare some drinks, and when she comes back she finds Tom chewing. When the effect kicks in, the couple decides to play hide and seek, and when Eve chooses a random room, she pushes the door so hard that she makes a hole in the wall. She hides behind the boxes for a while but ends up coming out, so Tom jump scares her. Then it's Tom's turn to hide, and while Eve counts, she hears a weird noise followed by someone yelling for help. She rushes to the entrance and is shocked to see one of the other wives from the project crying and desperately asking to be let in because her husband is trying to kill her. Eve tries to open the door but it's locked, so she starts waving at the camera and yelling for help too. At that moment the husband shows up, hits the woman's head against the door, and carries away the body. By the time Tom comes to the entrance, the people are gone. They ask to talk to the director, who appears as a hologram and tells a crying Eve they've checked the system and all the other couples are fine. He even shows her the footage, which shows Eve in front of the camera but nobody outside. Tom admits to the director that they consumed some uppers, so they conclude that caused a hallucination. However, Eve can't sleep that night because she still feels it was real. The next day Eve takes some medicine for her headache and throws away the remaining cookies. Tom asks for a little naughty time, but Eve turns him down and asks him to work on his book. Afterward they sit at the table and Eve gets to work on her designs, but Tom isn't writing anything. Instead he brings up the subject of having children again, ignoring Eve's request for silence. She snaps and starts pointing out all the issues they have to solve in their lives before even thinking about babies, like the fact he wants to live off his writing but he hasn't written anything since the study started. Eve promises that if he finishes his book, then they can consider a family at all. Feeling hopeful, Tom goes to the office to write. Moments later Eve visits Tom at the office and shows him the cover she's designed for his book. Tom admits he hasn't made any progress, which Eve finds weird because usually he couldn't go a day without writing. He starts to doubt if this should be his career, but Eve encourages him not to give up on his dream and mentions she fell in love with his passion. Afterward Eve goes to bed, but on her way to the bedroom, she hears a voice saying don't trust Tom. When she turns around she's startled by Tom, who asks her to spend the night getting naughty. However, Eve now feels weird and decides to go to sleep. On day 14, Eve is looking at some pictures of them and Tom mentions he loved that trip. However, Eve points out it was a design exercise and she added him in with Photoshop. Tom wonders if she's okay because she hasn't been wanting to get intimate lately, but Eve assures him she's just not in the mood. In the evening after Tom has gone to bed, Eve gets in contact with the mediator because it was her voice who told her not to trust Tom. The mediator says Tom isn't the man Eve thinks he is and admits that judging from the files, she hadn't expected the couple to make it past the first week. Before the mediator can say more, the call ends. That night Eve can't sleep, so she goes to the office to check what Tom has written so far, only to get stuck on the dedication that shows his love for her. Tom finds her and Eve decides to ask him if he's messing with her, revealing what the mediator said. She also asks him if he really ate the cookie, because he used to be the one with bad hangovers after it. Tom gets angry and accuses Eve of not trusting him, implying they should break up. A desperate Eve says she does trust him, she just feels things have felt off since they entered the house and the mediator has made it worse. Tom points out it must be part of the test to drive them apart and swears he'd never lied to her, causing Eve to hug him and apologize. From then on, Eve decides to keep up a more positive attitude and starts covering the house with Christmas decorations. When the mediator tries to talk to her, Eve just covers the hologram light to get her out of their lives. The next time she looks in the mirror, she notices she's gaining some weight. Meanwhile, Tom has been in his office writing a lot, and when he finishes decorating, she rewards him with some naughty time in front of the fireplace. However, as soon as he kisses her, she asks to stop and pushes him away, saying his kisses feel different. Tom keeps on kissing her to prove her wrong and won't stop when she asks, so she bites his lip and causes him to push her to the floor. For the next few days, Tom tries to convince Eve that things are fine, but she doesn't believe it. By day 20, all her illustrations have become incredibly creepy. That night Eve wakes up when she hears a noise coming from the hole in the wall and looks through it to discover Tom talking to the mediator. Tom tells her that Eve doesn't trust anything and that she isn't stable, so he wants help for her. The mediator announces they'll prescribe her a light sedative. Furious, Eve rushes to the living room and Tom says it was the mediator who rang, but Eve points out she never heard any ringing and that Tom isn't wearing the headset. She also goes to the dispenser and finds the sedative, throwing it at the mediator when she mentions she hasn't been checking in daily and accusing Tom of treating her like a crazy person. After telling Tom that the mediator is manipulating them, Eve leaves in a huff. That night, Eve feels sick and runs to the bathroom to throw up in the toilet. Remembering she's getting fat and has been pissing nonstop, Eve calls Tom over and tells him she's pregnant. Tom is very happy, but Eve is panicking. She wants to leave and talk about their options. The idea of even considering terminating the pregnancy makes Tom furious and he starts insulting Eve, calling her a bad mother and asking her to hide her pathetic depression for the sake of Christmas. Afraid, Eve plays along. On day 25, the couple exchanges gifts. Tom is excited to get a movie on Blu-ray, but Eve points out he hates that film and she bought it as a joke. Eve gets a curling iron, which she doesn't like very much. When she tries it out in the bathroom, she gets frustrated and throws it in the trash. Afterward, she joins Tom on the couch, who accuses her of not making an effort. He also wants to talk about the baby, but Eve shuts him up by asking about his book. An argument ensues and Eve says Tom isn't acting like himself, but Tom just leaves to get more popcorn. Eve uses the chance to call the mediator and ask for help, but the mediator says she can only observe and not interfere. Crying, Eve admits they aren't married and that somehow she's 6 months pregnant, but the mediator only replies that Tom is playing her and disappears. Desperate for answers, Eve goes to read Tom's notebook, and to her shock the only novel pages are the ones he wrote before entering the house. All the stuff he's been writing here isn't his story but an incredibly long list of baby names. Eve goes to confront Tom, who says he hasn't been able to write because Eve has been pressuring him. Furious, Eve yells at him and throws the notebook before leaving. Later in the bathroom, Eve kicks the trash can in frustration and finds all the protection they've been using. To her shock, they're all leaking, and when she checks the wrap, she discovers Tom has poked holes in it on purpose. She also sees the curling iron and gets an idea. Moments later, Eve invites Tom to have a bath with her. She keeps filling his glass with wine as they play Never Have I Ever and Tom gets it wrong when Eve says they've never been married. She admits that she knows about his forcing her to get pregnant and mentions 923 multiple times, but Tom doesn't get it. Upset, Eve goes to the kitchen and steals a knife, which she hides when Tom comes to bring her to bed. In the bedroom, Eve hides the knife under the pillow and tries to sleep, but Tom starts touching even though she keeps pushing his hands away. Tom reminds her that they're married and she should fulfill her duties as a wife, so Eve cuts his arm with a knife before trying to run. Angry, Tom grabs her by the hair and throws her on the bed, but Eve kicks him and runs to the bathroom, locking the door. Then she grabs the curling iron, which has been warming up all this time, and inserts it into her private area. The pain is unbearable and she can't go deep enough to kill the baby like she wanted. A furious Tom breaks the door glass and rushes in, throwing the iron into the bath and causing the power to go out. Then he threatens Eve, if she ever tries to hurt the baby again, he'll kill her. Soon the power is restored and the director appears to end their stay since obviously they're failing. Terrified of Tom's reaction, Eve assures him that she's fine, so the director allows them to stay as long as Eve takes her sedatives. When Eve asks what happened to the mediator, the director says she was fired. Later, Tom surprises Eve with a special dinner but doesn't let her a knife to cut her food. In fact, all the kitchen knives were hidden. Then he forces her to dance with him and Eve asks where the real Tom is, since this is obviously not him. Tom ignores the question and kisses her, so Eve uses the chance to stab him multiple times with a fork. As Tom falls, Eve grabs the knife from his meal and runs to the hole in the wall, which she makes bigger to step inside. By walking through a narrow corridor, Eve finds a door and comes out into the research facility. When she hears someone coming, she enters a random room and finds a bunch of sleeping women who look all exactly the same. On big screens, all the couples from the project are listed under memory mapping and the woman from the bed is classified as clone. There's also a butterfly flying around, known for its access to genetic memory. At that moment, Eve is found by guards and the director, who admits he cloned Tom and the real one is being used to finish filling the gaps in the clone's memory. It used to be impossible to map brains, so he started this experiment to work with multiple clones at the same time and perfect the technique. Eve wants to see the real Tom, and when the director refuses, she wakes up one of the women and holds her hostage at knife point. It turns out the director has cloned his wife and is trying to perfect the technique to bring her back for good. He's also been using the mapping of her brain as the mediator. Following Eve's threats, the guards drop their weapons and throw one at her, then a guard goes to fetch Tom. While the director tries to talk to his wife, Eve realizes the woman doesn't know she's a clone and tells her the truth. Heartbroken, the wife tells the director that she doesn't love him anymore. Then the guard comes back with Tom, who finally reunites with Eve. As they hug, Eve opens fire and kills the director, the wife clone, and all the guards. Then the couple tries to escape, but when they get to the corridor, they find another Tom and both men accuse the other one of being the clone. They're both bleeding, so Eve kisses the one next to her and feels something is wrong. As she steps back, both Toms say 923 and start listing all the things they know about her. Eve doesn't know who to shoot, so instead she threatens to kill the baby. A Tom tells her to do it while the other says she shouldn't, so Eve kills the Tom who said no. Suddenly Eve starts bleeding down there and Tom has to carry her out. The couple escapes but Eve loses the baby. When 923 comes, they get happily married. During the honeymoon, they start getting intimate, but Eve freaks out when she sees the wrap and notices this one was poked too. She tries pushing Tom off, but he grabs her by the neck and chokes her to death while saying he loves her. When he realizes what he's done, Tom tries to do CPR to no avail. To cover his crime, he uses some rope to make it look like she did it to herself. Back to the Tom telling the story in the present, he cries as he says he doesn't understand why Eve did it since he was the perfect husband. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.